Hello, it's Wednesday, the 4th of October, 2017, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Student Affairs Live, the online learning community for student affairs educators in higher education. I am your host, Heather Shea, broadcasting live from Michigan State University, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the panelists who have joined me today to talk about the search for a student affairs in higher education graduate program. But before I do that, I need to give thanks to those who make these free webcasts possible. Today's episode is made possible by ACPA, College Student Educators International. Support for Student Affairs Live is one of the many ways that ACPA provides innovative professional development. Visit myacpa.org to discover other personal and professional development opportunities coming soon to Houston, Texas. If you haven't yet registered for the National Convention, we're tweeting out a link now. Student Affairs Live is also a part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be a part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. And thanks again to my friend and colleague, Alex Sylvester, for monitoring today's back channel. If you have questions for our panelists, please tweet us at Higher Ed Live. We are going to take questions from Twitter at the very end of our episode today because of a slightly changed format. So please also use the hashtag HESA Masters 101, which is in the title of today's episode, and members of the Commission for Professional Preparation from ACPA will be helping answer questions from the HESA Masters hashtag. Student Affairs Live, as many of you know, is broadcast live on Wednesdays at 1 Eastern Time, and all of Tony's and my past episodes are free, easy to access. You can go to the video archives at Higher Ed Live or take Higher Ed Live with you by subscribing to our podcast. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first company committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. We want Higher Ed Live to be your go-to professional development resource. So to improve the quality and delivery, please participate in our audience survey that we're tweeting out now. Now, on with today's episode. As I was reflecting on today's episode, I was thinking about my own grad school selection process, and I was shocked to believe that it was 20 years ago this fall when I began the search for a Student Affairs Master's program. At the time, I was an undergraduate hall director at Colorado State University, and CSU had and has a great SAHI program, so I didn't look far. I applied, I accepted, I began my master's degree there in the fall of 1998. If my story is typical of grad students then, it's certainly very different today. Having engaged in conversation with many prospective grad students here at Michigan State, I know that higher education and master's programs are now abundant. Over 150 campuses offer such a degree, and making choices between those programs has become even more challenging. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about that grad school process, search process. We have current and former members of the ACPA Commission for Professional Preparation here as part of a larger series that they're going to be offering this spring at the ACPA National Convention. I want to acknowledge and give credit to Ryan Bronkema, one of the panelists on today's episode, for his help in all of the aspects of the development. The other thing I want to mention is that these are for faculty members' perspectives, not the end word on grad prep. That is why we're using the hashtag, and we definitely want to make sure that folks know that you probably have resources on your own campus to help you think about grad prep as well. So today we'll follow a slightly different format. We have some introductory material so you get to know our panelists, and then we have 3 very specific segments which we will introduce as we come to them, but they are field fit and timing, types of programs, and search strategies. And so we've kind of grouped our questions under those 3 headings. And so in future releases of this episode, people can fast forward directly to those sections. So let's introduce our panelists. And as each of you introduce yourselves, please share with us your current campus and position, and then where you went to your master's program, and maybe just a sentence about why, and then we have a longer second question to help you dig a little bit more into that. So Ryan, would you like to start? Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. My name is Ryan Bronkema. I am an assistant professor at the University of West Georgia, and I did my master's at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, one of the 13 regional campuses in the state of Wisconsin. And my one sentence would be, I wanted a counseling-focused degree, and so I did my search around programs that had a counseling focus. So that's how I ended up in northeastern Wisconsin. And I use he, him, his pronouns.
Great. Tiffany, welcome.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Tiffany Davis, and I am a clinical assistant professor of higher education at the University of Houston, and I also serve as the coordinator of the master's program. I did my master's degree at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio, in the College Student Personnel program. And the reason why I chose it was that I really wanted a program that was strong in both theory and practice, and Bowling Green was a great fit for an assistantship as well as a very strong curriculum.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. Brian, welcome to Student Affairs Live. Oh no, I can't hear you. Unmute. Oh, no. Oh, there you go.
Hello, everyone. All right. Hi, I'm Brian McGowan. I am an assistant professor of higher education at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I use he, him, and his pronouns. I did my master's degree at The Ohio State University, go Bucks. And the reason why I decided on Ohio State, similar to Tiffany, I wanted an institution that had a good theory to practice focus, did assistantship opportunities that would prepare me for my first job. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks so much, Brian. Glad you're here. Maureen, welcome. Welcome back, I should say, to Student Affairs Live.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Wilson, she, her, hers. I am professor and chair of the Department of Higher Education and Student Affairs at Bowling Green State University. And I earned my master's degree at Michigan State University back in the day. And I chose Michigan State because I visited and everything just felt right about it. And I had a really transformational experience there.
Great. So just really briefly, to give you all who are watching today a little bit more information about our panelists, and also maybe to help folks who are considering student affairs, but maybe would like to hear a little bit about how other people came to that work. I would love for you to each answer a couple of questions related to your own background as briefly as possible. So when did you know you wanted to pursue a career? What helped you make the decision? What undergraduate experiences or postgraduate actions helped you prepare? And if you had one thing to do differently, what would you have done differently? So that's all 4 questions at once. Feel free to answer any or all of those, just to give our audience a little bit of context of how you're answering these questions today. So Tiffany, we're going to start with you. Mute. Oh no. There you go.
There we go. I'm sorry. Well, good afternoon again. When did I know? I knew that I wanted to pursue student affairs when I was an undergraduate at the University of Tennessee. And I was involved in a lot of extracurricular, co-curricular activities, as many people who go into the field are. But my major was education for the deaf and hard of hearing going into school. And that's why I chose the University of Tennessee. And as I was there, I got involved. I became a resident advisor. I worked as a student alumni ambassador. I worked with men's basketball, orientation, and even had a work position on campus in the Office of Disability Services. And so it was actually when I started volunteering at the Tennessee School for the Deaf that I realized that while I had a passion around this group of students, work that I was doing in all of my campus involvement. And so I did orientation. I really got connected with some great folks, some mentors in orientation, parent program, service learning that said, you know, you can do this as a job. And it was also nice that Tennessee has a graduate program in student affairs. And so I worked with a lot of grad students who were able to provide me some feedback. I think the pivotal moment for me as an undergraduate was becoming a member of the then called Minority Undergraduate Fellows Program, now NASPA's Undergraduate Fellows Program. And so I was I was connected with a mentor on campus, and so the dean of students at that point, and she helped to socialize me into the profession. She took me to my first National Association meeting in Denver that year. I got to sit in on meetings, be on committees, and all of it really turned out really well in that I thought about, this is the same type of work that I wanted to do. It just was a different population in terms of being of service to people and helping folks to learn and grow. So that's how I got into the field.
Great. Next is Marie. Welcome.
This part of my story is not unique at all in that I'm one of many, many people who figured out at some point during college, after being involved as an RA, that you can do this sort of thing for a living. And so I talked with some of the leaders in our department, and they gave me some things to think about, but also because they knew that I was interested in this, they really helped me craft some experiences to go more in depth. So I was actually a 3-year RA, and they'd never had that before. And so they created a new position for me of head resident, was able to supervise the front desk staff, was able to co-teach the RA course. And so those sorts of opportunities really helped me just learn more about it, and then prepare for the interviews that followed. It really worked out well. I don't think that I would do anything differently than I did. It was really a terrific experience for me.
Thanks so much, Maureen. Ryan, tell us about your background.
All right. Hello?
Yep.
All right. Yes. So when did I realize? So based on my undergraduate leadership experience, to be honest, I was in residence life. Maureen, I was also a 3rd-year RA.
Mm-hmm.
I was an orientation leader, and I was also on our president's undergraduate council. And anyone who knows me, I sing. My undergrad is in music education. I love to sing, but I also developed a love for helping undergraduate students. And I had to choose between the two. I sought out some mentors and had some conversations. So again, I see a theme between our stories, the importance of having good mentors to help guide us. But quick story, my junior year, I went to my vice president of student affairs and said, hey, I want to be you. He said, no, you don't. Like, who are you? I said, no, I want to be you. And he sent me on an assignment to meet with all of the directors in the student affairs division. And 3 weeks later, I came back with a pad of all this information where their degrees were from, their experiences, and said, no, seriously, I want to be you. And he took me under his wing, and long story short, I ended up going to the Ohio State University. So that was my quick story.
Great, thanks, Brian. I love hearing these background stories because there are some common threads. So folks are watching today and hearing some of those same things resonate with their own experience, and this maybe is a career path for you. Ryan, tell us a little bit about how you got in.
Yeah, so I have some things in common with the other folks and some differences. So I also was a 3rd-year RA, and I was majoring in business, and I knew that it was not for me. But I didn't really know what to do. And so my whole family, for the most part, is connected to K-12 schools. So I thought I wanted to be a high school counselor. So my master's pursuit was to get a degree in counseling with an emphasis in K-12 education, right? So when I went to the Oshkosh Placement Exchange, and if you have questions about that, I'll send a tweet with links and stuff later on so you can figure out what that is. I was looking to end up in high schools, and I ended up getting a hall director position to help me like subsidize that. But my initial intent wasn't to pursue higher education. It wasn't until after my first semester or midway through my first semester that it sort of occurred to me that I liked working with college students a lot. And I was convincing myself that I liked to work with high school students, but I didn't know that. And so through some job shadowing, I realized that I was doing the thing that I probably wanted to do more already. And so I switched my emphasis, luckily, to higher education, and ended up finishing my counseling degree that way. So there certainly wasn't any regret there, because I think I appreciate where I'm at more because it took me much longer to know that this was right. I think I knew I was in the helping track, but the format of that didn't quite become clear until I was knee deep in student leadership, advising, and working with RAs and that kind of thing. So I was kind of a late bloomer per se of the group, and probably of other folks, in that I was already in a master's program when I came to came to realize that this was the right thing.
Well, interesting. So I'm looking at Twitter while we're answering questions, and we have a comment from CJ Venable about how our perspectives might have been different if we hadn't entered through the RA path. So that was something we didn't check before. So if folks have not been RAs, that might be something to also look at, because that's not the only entry point into student affairs for sure. Student government, fraternity and sorority life, other student org involvement, other things. So thanks for that comment. I think that's important to name. So we're going to move into segment 1 of our episode today, which are questions around fit and timing, and field fit related to student affairs broadly, and then when potentially should you go into a master's program immediately after undergrad or otherwise. So Maureen, we're going to talk with you first about, I imagine that you've had several conversations with prospective students over the years. So what are some ways that someone can gather information to help them determine whether student affairs might be a good fit for them or potentially not?
Well, definitely, I would encourage people to seek a variety of experiences and perspectives. Even reading about student affairs in outlets like the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Education, and particularly Inside Higher Ed is free. So if you're interested in the sort of stuff that pops up in there, that might be an indication that you're interested in the field. But I would encourage students to pay close attention to what happens in the Division of Student Affairs on their own campus, but also what's happening on other campuses and what plays out there. I would encourage students to talk to current students in programs and recent graduates as well, but also understand that your experience won't mirror theirs. Your experience will be your own. So the fit question, I think, is always a little tricky. I think first about the fit with the field overall. Sometimes I have a feeling that some people land in graduate programs because they're not quite sure what they want to do after college. They may have been an involved student leader, or they may have had a really good college experience and think, maybe that would be okay. I would encourage you to be a little more intentional and thoughtful than that. So if you're not really sure that you're pretty passionate about this, go get a job. There are some jobs that you can get with a bachelor's degree working in higher ed, or get a job outside of higher ed and do some more looking and exploring. So I would encourage people to not just stumble in because it feels like a safe landing spot. So you don't need to know it's a lifetime commitment on day one, but I do think that you want to have some level of confidence that this is what you want to do. I think some struggle with the question of whether the field is a good fit for them or not. Others struggle because they like the experiential components of the program, but they might struggle with the academic aspects. Some will feel let down or surprised that everybody doesn't share their same values, or that they don't share the same commitment to the work, or they don't do the work like you think it needs to be done. And so I think trying to get a variety of perspectives on that is important as well. And you had asked me who I thought tends to take well to the field. I think some of those are folks who figure out how to work effectively both within and against institutions. When people talk about the administration, or the administration did this or they don't do that, you're becoming the administration, so the administration is you, and you've got to have some comfort with that. I think those who take well to the field are deeply engaged in the academic life of the program and of the institution, and feel a deep commitment to the work that we do for our students and for our campuses. They have an openness to feedback and to new perspectives. So there's not a single best program for anybody. There's not a single best fit. But I do tend to believe that in visiting a program, you ought to get a pretty good sense of being able to see yourself there or not. I think it's good to be open to surprises and in out of the way places, and see what possibilities might be available, and having a sense of adventure about it. And also pay attention to who your peers in the program would be, and who are the faculty, not necessarily who are at the program, but who will actually teach the courses that you will take. So those are some of my thoughts, Heather.
Those are great. I really liked the working within and against, because I think that's what's characterizing our campuses today, right? Who are the engaged student leaders? Often those are the activists, and those are potentially the folks that we want in student affairs to help us make a more broader, sweeping, systemic change. Tiffany, tell us a little bit about potentially some advantages of going straight from undergrad into a master's program versus taking time off. And do graduate programs consider that differently if they did take time off and worked first?
Sure. So when I think about some of the advantages of going straight to grad program after your master's degree, I think the first that stands out for me is that most times people are excited about getting a start on their career. And so they want to be able to go to a master's program, finish in a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on how you structure your program. And that's exciting to be able to say that I finished my master's degree and I'm eligible to start, because a lot of the jobs that we see now have a master's required as a minimum requirement. And so while what Maureen said is true, that there are jobs that do not require a master's degree, we are seeing that overwhelmingly many of them will require the master's degree. And so that's, of course, the first advantage in going. The second one that I came up with is kind of academic timing, right? So some of us, you're in undergrad, you have been plowing through for 4 to 5 to 6 years, and you're like, you know what? I still have a little bit of stamina. I can go. I'm already in that frame of mind. I know how to read. I know how to write. I have my study skills up. I've been living off of meager wages possibly for the last 4 years. Let's go on and do this for another 2. And so that timing is there for people in that they're like, I can do this. I think also too, nowadays, our profession has done a great job of incorporating undergraduates into the professional life of student affairs through initiatives such as ACPA's Next Generation Conference, through NASPA's NUF program, multiple organizations, even ACUHO-I, the housing conference organization, having the STARS program for undergraduates. So lots of different organizations are really taking an interest. And so what that means is that undergraduates are excited and they don't want to wait and put off another year or 2 to go. So those are some of the advantages of getting a start, finding people, connecting with people. Those folks are going to school. You want to go to school with them as well. Some of the disadvantages that I see, the first is, I just said it, finances. Not everyone is in a position to be able to go straight to graduate school, especially if they've had to fund some part of their education, of their undergraduate education. And I think it's very important for undergraduates to know, back in the day, even when I went to my master's program, everyone was like, you should not pay for your own education in student affairs. That is not true. The landscape has changed over the past couple of years, and more student affairs, higher education graduate students are asked to carry some of the burden of financing your education. And so I think that financial literacy is a key thing that we need to make sure that people understand about, like, what does it mean? Every month when I have to pay back those loans, I start thinking back to, was this the best idea? Maybe I should have gone and worked and saved up a little money before I went back to school. And so I think finances is certainly one of those things. Academic exhaustion. Some of us are just tired. We do not want to sit in another class. We don't want to learn another theory or concept. We don't want to write a paper. And I think that's okay for people to be really honest with themselves, depending on what their undergraduate career looked like. Maybe you're tired and you're like, I can't give enough enough time and effort and energy to the academic process. And so academic exhaustion. The third thing is that sometimes people don't think about, but as you heard from all of our presenters, is that we all had other majors. My undergraduate major was human ecology and family science. And so some of you, do want to use your degree, like you worked hard for that architecture or that chemical engineering or that, accounting. And so you don't want to think about the what ifs of this is what I want to do, but now I have this new interest. Is this an interest that's sustaining? Those kind of pieces. And so I think it's important for people to think about, do they want to use the major that they've been planning and working towards for the past 4 to 6 years? With the gap year, so then the term gap year means when you take time off between going to undergraduate and then going to your master's program. When I think about what that looks like, some benefits to that is that it allows people to get some perspective. As Maureen mentioned, we have people that stumble into the field, and so they have not gotten an accurate representation of what this field and what our values are. And so I think that sometimes having a gap year, working in the professional world, whether that's in student affairs or whether that's outside, can give you a little bit of a time to see behind the curtain, per se, for the field. And so making sure that you're spending time talking to your mentors and such will really be helpful in that. Also to gain experience through programs that you might not have an opportunity to do later. So AmeriCorps, Teach for America, City Year, other civic learning opportunities. And then lastly, an advantage of the gap year is that you really just want to explore more. And so you want to explore more and be ready to search for a grad program. And so what that means is that you can work in the field without a degree. There are lots of jobs in admissions and Revs Life and orientation. There's even been some schools like Texas A&M that have offered kind of like these post-bac 1-year programs to provide exposure to the field for undergraduates. And that's a really great thing. And so I think that that's another positive of the gap year experience. How do we look at that as grad committees? I would say most of our programs do holistic reviews of candidate applications, but the gap year experience, if you are able to articulate what have you done during that time, what can you contribute to a program, it looks favorably. It doesn't look bad that you didn't come back from straight from undergrad. It actually provides some opportunity for you to experience, to talk about the maturity, the diversity of experience that you've been able to receive, the transferable skills that you can give to the academic program. So all of those things are really helpful when we think about the gap year experience. Also, some people that come into the field have some academic deficiencies that a gap year, some time away, work on that GRE, maybe retake a course, maybe do a kind of a grad course at a school to demonstrate that you are able and to do graduate level work also looks impressive for graduate committees as well. And so I think, again, it just comes down to what is most authentic for you to think about gap year, as well as going straight to and thinking about your own personal life and the responsibilities that you have.
Great. Thanks so much.
I'd like to reinforce one thing Tiffany said about that gap year and being able to work in the field without a degree. So one thing is typically about a third of our first year students every year have had some sort of work experience in between college and grad school. And I think it adds an awful lot to our cohort. So those sort of bachelor's level student affairs positions, like she said, in admissions or student activities or residence life, can be a great way to check it out a little bit more, to pay off some bills or build up a little cash reserve. But I think the ability to move up very far with that, you'll find yourself limited. So it's a great way to check it out. But if ultimately you want to stay in the field, you'll have a tough time at a lot of places advancing very far without the master's degree. But by all means, some time off can be fantastic.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the contested issues that we have unpacked in the debates that Tony and I have hosted at ACPA over the years. Do you need a master's degree? Is a master's degree the best degree? In student affairs, the best degree to enter the field? Lots of interesting perspectives on this, and we all probably share something different.
Right.
I personally went straight through, and at the time that I finished my master's degree, I had lived in the residence halls for 7 years straight.
I paid rent for the first time 2 weeks before I turned 32.
Hashtag student affairs.
Yes.
So let's move to segment 2 of our program today and talk a little bit about the different types of programs there are to choose from. And those are many. So Ryan and Brian are going to kind of tee up this section today. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about the different types of program foci. What are the advantages of these different foci, and other kinds of suggestions as far as the various options for programs, online, hybrid, etc. So
I will do my best. I will be the first to admit that what we're about to enter into involves some rather broad generalization. So when we talk about types of programs, there are hundreds of options out there. And so to narrow them down even into some simple categories makes some assumptions. So please know that this is coming with some simplification that we can obviously provide clarification for if folks need that. So if we were to narrow down the types of programs that exist that one might consider as they're entering student affairs, I would boil it down into really 5-ish themes. The first I've already mentioned, in that, like, I attended a counseling program. There are not that many counseling programs left, but there are programs that have counseling focus in higher education and student affairs, and so that would be one of the categories. The second one would be broadly categorized as administration or higher education administration, and might be more concerned with administrative type curricula and sort of how organizations work and organizational development, that type of thing. The third broad category I would call student learning and development. And this is more a program that might be focused on the psychological and sociological experiences of college students and how we as professionals might make a difference in that. The fourth is even broader, in that there are a lot of programs that were sort of born out of K-12 leadership programs that have higher education emphasis. And so they might be called leadership in sort of spirit, or have a leadership theory component piece to them, but there are definitely more of those arriving all the time. And then there are also programs that would fall under what I would call policy. There are fewer of these, but there are definitely more master's options if you're interested in government policy and sort of how higher education policy works. And so those would be the 5 general overview categories that I would consider. So again, that's counseling, administration, student learning and development, leadership, and then policy. Here comes the complicated part. So we have the 5 or general types, but then you also can attend classes in person, which is probably the most common way undergraduate students experience college. You can attend classes and master's programs at a hybrid level, and some of those are every other week, some of them are once a month, some of them are once a semester, some of them are once a year. And then there are some programs that are purely online that you never meet at all. And so you've got options as to how you might execute each of these. To get to the question about which might be best or for whom is it best, that is its own podcast series. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest, if you're thinking about getting a master's degree, to work in reverse. And what I mean by reverse is think about the format in which you'd like to take your program in first. So if you say have a full-time position and maybe you have a family and you know that you're geographically limited, maybe hybrid options and or online options are where you start. If you're more geographically flexible or you want to see different parts of the world, you might consider pursuing a degree that's more in person, or that might have a cohort model that you could actually physically move from point A to point B to do that thing. And obviously hybrid kind of falls in the middle if you feel like there's some sort of geographic flexibility, but not a ton. So I would start there and work backwards. Once you've decided what lateral capabilities you have as far as how you could take the program in, then I would start thinking about what, for lack of a better word, flavor program you're interested in. The easiest way for me to narrow that down is counseling is a very dichotomous choice. You either know you're interested in counseling skills or you don't. And so if you don't want it, you can just cross counseling right off the list. If you do want it, that crosses off a lot of options on the list because some programs don't necessarily have the space to include those skills in the curriculum. And so that's kind of an easy way to start narrowing things down a little bit. As far as administration, student learning, leadership, and policy, a lot of that I would encourage you to just start to look at curricula. Like, what courses are they teaching? What courses look exciting to you? Where do you see yourself like finding the most meaning in the curriculum as you're sort of going through it? But it's so personal. I would hate to sort of say that a person that gets a student learning and development degree is good at X, Y, Z. Because I think that's unfair given how diverse our programs are. But if you look at those sort of broad starting points and use some online search engines for higher education and student affairs master's programs, I think that will start to give you a pretty decent option. And we'll talk about some of those search mechanisms here coming up toward the end of the broadcast too.
Great. Brian, can you talk a little bit about how the type of program you end up choosing affects the career options that are available? So at postmasters opportunities for folks, what doors might close if, for example, I go to a highly theoretical program or to a higher ed administration type program? So if you can talk a little bit about that, and then how can you tell if a program, if you're specifically interested in social justice, how can you tell a program is going to aim for that, or you want your long-term career to focus on social justice? How can you make sure your program prepares you for that?
Yeah, so in terms of the type of program and does it affect what career options are available, personally, I don't think it affects career options. I think it's more about how you package the experiences that you gain in your respective program. And so I would pose questions like, are you connecting theory to practice? Like, how have you mastered the core competencies that undergird our field? Have you taken advantage of supplemental opportunities? Kuhuai, NODA, there are different internship opportunities on your campus. I know as a master's student, I work in career services. I was interested in doing that. I also had opportunities in orientation that were independent of my assistantship. So are you maximizing opportunities as well? What have you learned from these experiences? And again, thinking about, the resume, interview skills, is how are you packaging it? What is your narrative and who are you? So I will focus less on the program type and probably more on the experiences that you're gaining in your respective program. For those that are thinking about online programs, I taught in an online program as well. Is it synchronous or is it asynchronous? That's something that you need to think about. So are you logging in and having class with a group of students every week, or is it prepackaged? But I will also urge you to still find ways to engage with your faculty and peers, depending on your program type. And to kind of merge the second question, overall, you have to do your homework. I encourage you not to arbitrarily enter the field. Go to different websites and look at the curriculum, the faculty research interest. Again, piggybacking on Maureen's point, who will actually be teaching your classes during your time in the program, which is a very important question. So because you're on someone's website and you look at the list of faculty, you need to ask some deeper questions, and who's connected to the program and who will be pivotal in shaping your experience. Thinking about programs, is it more practice-based or more research-based? So some programs have one internship requirement, some have 2 or 3. So again, if you're doing more internships, you're taking fewer classes. So just thinking about the curriculum and the types of experiences that you're getting. Talk to current students in the program and recent graduates and where they're landing. We all have different reasons or rationales for going to graduate school, but one of the goals for attending a master's program is to secure employment. And so what is the job placement rate of your program? That's a very important question too. So again, I'm introducing some other things to think about in addition to the type of program, but how is my program preparing me to get my first job? Is one thing that you may want to think about. In terms of the other part of your question, Heather, thinking about the curriculum, literally go and look at the course titles. If you're interested in social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, is it in the course title? If not, perhaps it's embedded in the fabric of the whole curriculum. But again, you have to ask those questions if that's important to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that's something that if you dig a little deeper, the other point about who's actually teaching in your program, I think is really critical, because many of these phenomenal master's programs are at schools that also have phenomenal doctoral programs. So are those doc students getting the faculty's primary attention, or are they going to be working with master's students is a really key question to ask. As a doc student currently at Michigan State University. So I should disclaimer that. So thanks so much for sharing those comments. So we're going to now move on to section 3, which is about kind of search strategies. How does one begin to go about the search? So one of the questions I think that we often get is around the GRE. Some programs require it, some programs don't. Maureen, can you kind of illuminate why that might be the case, or why it might not be the case at different institutions? And
yeah, so it will definitely vary institution to institution. For us, the graduate college requires it, and so we have to do it. But I'll also say that the GRE for us, and I think for many other programs as well, won't on its own make or break an application. It's one of many pieces of information that we consider. So strong GRE combined with strong grades bodes well for our academic evaluation. But there are other components of the application we look at as well. So a 4.0 and great GPA, but not a clear articulation of why this program, why this field, may not bode so well. Strong grades coupled with sort of middling GRE scores will just have us look a little more closely at where the weakness is. For instance, we're more concerned by low writing and verbal scores typically than quantitative scores. Low grades combined with low GREs will give us pause, and we'll look for an applicant to explain that and help us understand what's going on there. We want to be confident that you can handle the academic rigor of the program. Tiffany mentioned earlier, if you have some weaknesses there and you've taken a year off, take a grad class. Show us that you can do well in graduate level work, and that can help. A strong GRE can also help compensate for a lower than average GPA. Sometimes the GPA is lower because somebody started out in a major that wasn't a very good fit, and you can see where they changed majors and their performance got a lot better. I tell our candidates, I don't like to see a lot of C's and D's on a transcript, but I'm more concerned about seeing that in the junior and senior year than I am somebody who maybe had a bumpy start or a rough go in a major that didn't fit for them very well. But where I can see patterns of improvement, that's a really good thing. So again, the GRE is just one of several data points that we look at, and it's not going to make or break the application. I know that there are financial concerns with the cost of the GRE as well. We are going to tweet out a link to the Gre Fee Reduction Program, and that can help some students defray the cost of the GRE. And you might also ask at your institution if there's any institutional support for that as well. And Heather, I don't think this is on our list of questions, but it's also possible sometimes to ask the institution to waive the application fee or to reduce that. Sometimes, for instance, students who are part of the McNair program can get that. Here we offer some incentives. If students have done some different things, then we can waive that. So it never hurts to ask if there's a school that you're really interested in. but you're having a hard time overcoming financial barriers.
Great. I think one of the questions that I didn't include in my prompt too is about how standardized tests replicate systems of inequality in education. And so I just, out of curiosity, if any of you have GRE requirements at your institution, have we pushed back against that piece of it?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Just last week, here at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, we had a faculty meeting to talk about, should we still require it? It's a debate that we're currently having for all the reasons that we know. And so, yeah, we're actively talking about it. And it wouldn't surprise me if we moved away from that requirement. Again, we look at applications holistically, as some of my colleagues had mentioned. But yeah, we're having that conversation right now.
We are as well, and are talking about what alternatives that we might be able to employ instead.
Great, good. So Tiffany, tell us a little bit about what are some of the different ways that I might go about doing a search for a graduate program. Ryan kind of talked about the different types of graduate programs, but in terms of functional areas, geographic, what are some different ways that I might go about doing that search?
Sure. So I think the first kind of search that people tend to do, especially those who go into the field and they're involved as undergraduates, the first thing you do is you go to the people that you work with the most and you say, hey, director so-and-so, assistant director so-and-so, what program should I look at? They give you their personal top 5 list, and then you're like, I'm going to one of these. And that's what a lot of people do. And so don't really do a lot of work on their own behalf. They take the opinions of others, and that's a great starting point. But I think that for a grad search to be the most effective, I think that students first need to think about who they are and what they want out of their experience, as well as thinking about their social identities, what they can and cannot do in terms of leaving, moving, what they can afford. So for example, when I went to Bowling Green, I remember not wanting to be cold because I am in the South. And then I remember thinking I went there and I really enjoyed it. And then someone came back and I was like, I just don't know. I was like, I love the program. I love the faculty. I loved all of that. I said, but I don't like to be cold. And it snows there. And someone gave me such sage advice and insight. And they said, it doesn't snow in the library. Touche. And so, and I would have counted out a great institution purely because I did not want to go to where it snowed.
My thought was, let us get you a coat and a pair of boots.
They had to help winterize me. But some of the ways that you can think about searching, the first is to think about functional areas. So some people know that they want a career in fraternity and sorority life, or they want to do student activities, or they want to do orientation. And it's not necessarily that certain schools are better for that, but what might be available in terms of graduate assistantships for that year is what people are concerned about. So they might look and say, okay, I'm looking at all these schools. I'm using the NASPA directory. I'm using the ACPA directory. I'm using the information from mentors, friends, and colleagues. But then you go and ask, like, what might be assistantships that are available? And if there are some institutions that most of them may be in residence life, and if you know that that's not what you want to do and you don't want to do a graduate assistantship in that area, then some people won't do that institution. Or if they don't have assistantship opportunities, that might not be the program for you. So I think looking at assistantship opportunities is certainly one of the areas. Geographic search. Some people, like I said, when I was looking, I was like, I don't want to be cold. And so I decided I wasn't really going to look, but a couple of people, BG's name just kept coming up. And so that's why I applied there. But every other school was in the South. And so that was important for me. Some people love the different types of, when you think about what areas of the country are known for. We now know, so for example, like, students who are DACA are not probably looking to be in certain states, right? Because of the protections afforded to them. Or when you think about program diversity, there are some schools that try as they want, Montana is not going to have racial ethnic diversity in the same ways that a University of Houston might, even a UNC Greensboro might, a school in Atlanta, New York. Montana just cannot compete with us. I'm sorry, Montana. But there are certain states and areas that just is not going to, even though they thrive in diversity and social justice, equity, inclusion, that's just not going to probably happen as easy as it can for other places. And so for some people, that's really important to look at not only the program diversity in terms of representation, but also the values and the culture of the area. I am a Black girl who likes to get her hair done. I wanted to go places where I can buy hair products in the store in my city. We had one aisle in Bowling Green, and that was enough for me. But for some other people, they're like, nope, I need to go somewhere else where my culture, that I can find my own food, my people, my tribe, like I can do that. And so that could be important for people. And also whether people can go far away. Not everyone will do well to transition where they don't know anyone, where they don't have family or support or a community of folks. And so the geographic, what Maureen just mentioned, is real, as well as about the GRE. Some students, they know themselves, and they're like, I cannot compete, and I don't want to, or I don't want to take the GRE. And so therefore only look at schools that do not require the GRE, or that may have lower GPA requirements. We also know that not everyone is leaving undergrad with a 3.5 GPA or even a 3.0, that we have some stellar applicants for those reasons that Maureen mentioned, that have lower GPAs. And so some programs may not be attainable. Although I think you really should make sure to ask programs about their GPA requirements, but the GRE and the GPA can certainly help students to narrow down a search. And then, as I think Ryan mentioned, is looking at the curriculum. I always say, forget about what those 5 things, even though those are really great, Ryan, forget about what those 5 things and areas he said. Look at the curriculum. Do you want to sit in a class about alcohol and addiction? Do you want to sit in a class about student learning and development, or one that's policy, finance, or theory? If those courses don't kind of appeal to you, even if the branding of the program is student learning and development, that may not be a good fit for you. And so look at the curriculum and see if those, go to course catalogs and see if that stuff works for you, can be a good way of searching. And then let's see. Do the interviews. Like I said, do the interviews with people, ask where they went, people that know you, because there are some programs, even when I was looking at my doc program, they were like, oh, this will be a great spot, but not for you. And they could tell me why this wouldn't be the best fit for me, because they may have inside information. And so you're just taking all of these pieces of information and making them. And then the last part is just don't assume that other people know best. You really want to investigate fit in a variety of things and think about what fit is most important for you. For me, financial fit was more important for me than to be able to go and get my hair done. It just was. Bowling Green had an assistantship. They paid tuition at that time. All of that stuff was a much better fit for me than I was like, I'll just fly home if I need to go get my hair done, or I'll learn to do it myself. Those are kind of things so financial fit weighed out for me. For me, the curriculum was much more important to me, and the peers, because I got to meet them at the interview days. So those kind of things. So even rank what fits are most important. And then you can say, I'm making this decision because these are the things that are most important to me, because whether that's a top program that are always consistently in the top 5, or you have some up and coming programs that they may be a good fit for you too. So I think just don't limit yourself in your options.
Great. So we had a fabulous quote from, or a point from Mr. Venable. I keep quoting him today. Thank you for your point. We should return to the discussion about funding and the labor that's required of graduate students. So this kind of tees up my question to you, Brian. Okay. How do you get graduate school paid for? What are the various assistantship compensation models. And if you want to unpack a little bit of CJ's point regarding labor and grad students, feel free to go down that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, CJ, for continuing to engage with us. I want to piggyback on Tiffany's point that the landscape has changed in recent years. I too received advice that you should not pay for graduate school. I was told that by several mentors, and I didn't. However, that is not the case anymore. Having served as a program coordinator and having to hear some of the conversations that are occurring around budgets, and it's just a different landscape. So I want to put that out there tenfold. But there are assistantship opportunities. There's some type of tuition assistance and a stipend that typically comes with these packages. And of course, if you are in housing and residence life, you'll get room and board in most cases. Many institutions have interview days where you actually go to campus and actually interview for these funding packages. And then some do not have interview days, and you have to work with the faculty, and there are different processes. So again, look at the institution and what type of, not only the types of assistantships, but how do you acquire them as well. Those are important things. And thinking about some of the cost, I want to talk about getting graduate school paid for, but I want to talk about costs in a more broader context. I want to talk about it during the recruitment process, because you may have to book flights and hotels or pay for meals while you're looking at different institutions. Depending on the number of schools you're looking at, that can become costly. So again, think about the number of schools that you're applying to as well. But also, once you are in a program, I think there are some costs that you need to think about beyond tuition and fees as well. And so in a few cases, there are some fellowships available at certain institutions for certain reasons. And so that's one way. Another aspect, there are some supplemental paid opportunities. Again, in my second year, I worked 10 hours a week in career services. I think I got like $15 or $17 an hour for 10 hours a week to review resumes and cover letters for seniors who were didn't know what they wanted to do, and my job was to help them. So that was a great opportunity. There are also professional development opportunities to travel to conferences. So again, I know you're thinking about getting your schooling paid for, but I want you to also think about some of the costs that you will incur once you're in the program. There are student government associations that may have money. Certain assistantships may provide some type of travel support to conferences. So while you're thinking about this, think about cost in three ways. How much am I going to have to spend during the process? And of course, tuition and fees, but also think about the types of experiences you want to have in the program and what are the costs associated with those as well. And so I will look at cost in three ways.
Yeah, I think the follow-up point that CJ just made, that 20 hours is not necessarily 20 hours related to many of the assistantships that our students are in, I think is another kind of critical piece to make, or point to make. So good. Grad unionization. Howard, right. Okay. I think my assistantship was a 30-hour week assistantship, and that was a lot. It's a lot, yeah. So want to kind of conclude this section about searching with just how do I find out about all the different options? We've talked about talking to mentors. Are there some online resources that we should know about, Ryan? And then talk to me about timelines and questions about the process and other follow-up.
Yes, great. So a couple of really quick things that you should know as we sort of look for programs is there are a couple of directories published online that allow you to search by various criteria, and they're published and maintained by two of the larger national organizations in higher education and student affairs. And we'll tweet out address links for those search options here coming at the end. So they'll give you a pretty decent platform to search by program type, or do they have assistantships, or what region of the country are they in, or sort of things that variables that might be of consideration to you. So I definitely would search for those most certainly, and that would be a great option for you to use. Toward your question about timelines, some of the grad programs will have application deadlines coming up as soon as November 15th. So if you know for a fact you're interested in attending a higher education and student affairs program in the fall of 18, start looking around, because some of those programs' due dates are coming up in about 6 weeks, and you'll want to notify people to write you letters and request transcripts and such. So just start looking around. I know that the range loosely for application deadlines is probably going to go from November 15th to mid-February, maybe March 1st. So it's rather wide, but I would hate for you to miss a program that you're interested in that has a November 15th or December 1st deadline if you've kind of got late in the game. So I would start to look around to see what's out there. And we obviously certainly can answer questions about that as those things sort of arise as well.
Can I ask one other follow-up related to that? What is the commitment date when folks need to decide this is when I am going to fill in the blank institution?
That is a great question. So the programs in our field have sort of gotten together and agreed on a gentle agreement that we aren't going to pressure candidates to commit before April 15th. So if you get, say, an offer to come attend the University of West Georgia from myself, and you also get an offer to attend Bowling Green State University from Maureen, neither of us should ethically pressure you to decide to go to their school before that date. So if you're getting pushed to say, oh, you have to decide by February 1st or whatever, know that it's not a law, but we've sort of all agreed as faculty members that it's fair to give students space to make that decision. That's an excellent addition to this that you brought to that. So I'm glad you did.
Great, good. Any follow-up places? So we mentioned already that the HESA Masters 101 hashtag is going to be monitored by members of the ACPA Commission for Professional Preparation as a way to address any future questions or concerns folks who are watching today have, or who are watching our episodes in the video format later. Finally, in your final thoughts, I would love for you all to kind of share kind of one way that you might encourage somebody gently not to do a student affairs search. So like one kind of, if you're going to go into student affairs, here's one thing not to do. And then any other kind of final thoughts you have for folks watching today. So let's see, Maureen, how about you go first?
I don't know that I have great advice on what not to do. It really is so unique. I think the whole bit about trusting your gut is really important. I think you'll have a pretty good sense of what's a good fit. So maybe what's not to do is make a decision based on somebody else's input, particularly when it overrules how you feel about it yourself. So trust yourself, trust your instincts, do good work to get there. The other thing I would say, and I tweeted this out, but I've seen a pretty big increase in the number of programs that people are applying for. That takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. And so explore 10 or 15 programs, sure, but there's really no reason that you should need to apply to 10 or 15 programs. 2, 3, 4, 5 should be plenty. It gives the programs a more realistic sense of who's really interested, and it'll save you a good bit of time and money doing it that way as well. And the other thing that I would say about the April 15th deadline that Ryan mentioned, so that's an agreement that institutions have made with the Council of Graduate Schools. But the flip side of that is, I think, being respectful of that and letting schools know as soon as you can what your decision is. You'll meet nice candidates at interview days, and that's who's affected by your decision. So for a candidate to hold on to multiple offers from multiple institutions sort of jams up the whole process, and it keeps a lot of really good candidates sort of hovering out there waiting for news that we can't give them as we wait for somebody who probably likely isn't coming to the institution, but they won't tell us that. So you have until April 15th, but there really shouldn't be a reason to hold on to multiple offers until late in the season. So it's helpful for the other candidates and it's helpful for the programs. But there are a lot of great programs out there, a lot of great opportunities. And if you're interested in it, you should certainly be able to find one that's a good fit for you.
Great. Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah.
Ryan. go to you next.
I echo all of Maureen's sentiments, and I would add, this isn't necessarily a search technique, but if I was to offer one piece of advice about whether or not student affairs is a good fit or that you should pursue it, often students come in and suggest they loved their undergraduate experience and they had a really great time and they felt meaningful and they were engaged. And that's great. And that is exactly what we're trying to do in higher education. But millions of students have a great experience every year. And so if your primary reason for pursuing graduate study is because you had a good time and you felt good about your undergraduate experience, ask a lot of questions of other people who work in the field, because the intrinsic motivation you get from being a student affairs practitioner is very different than what you get as a student leader as an undergraduate student. And not that it's obviously possible to achieve both, because many people find really fulfilling careers in student affairs, but the two things are not the same. So if you did have a great experience and that's a primary indicator to you, ask people, ask anybody that works on your campus, sit down, take them to lunch, get coffee, like visit their office, just to ask them what it is that they find meaningful about their work, to start to parse out how that might look for you. That would be my one piece. And that sort of relates to my closing thought. It never hurts to ask as many people as possible what their experience was, because all you do is continue to create a more well-rounded perspective about how it might be for you and how it might be for the diverse identities of folks that might be similar to you and different than you as you think about entering the field. So I would ask as many questions as possible to inform your choice as you go.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Brian.
Yeah, so in terms of what not to do, the first thing that came in my head, remember that you're building a relationship with a program through your emails, your interactions with current students and alums. When you get to a campus visit, the things that you do, if there's an elevator, like just the little things that you don't think about, you're interacting with your program the minute you send that email and every interaction you have with people along the way. So be remembered for things that will make us want you in our program and not for other reasons. So just be mindful of that. I think sometimes people don't think about their engagement with the program. It's all of those steps. And so that's my what not to do. But in terms of final thoughts, I'm really excited about our field growing. And so you are going to be the future of our field. So although this process can seem daunting, which program should I be in? Who should I work with? This is exciting. So I want to reframe that. But also, closed mouths do not get fed. So piggybacking on Ryan, ask questions, do your homework, and it's okay to do so. So I would say closing comment, closed mouths do not get fed.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tiffany, you get the final word.
Everyone has given all of the great answers, so I just was crossing them out like categories. So what not to do? I would say don't be closed-minded to the possibilities that the field and the different programs offer. I think that a lot of times it is great to get all of this feedback and stuff, but sometimes we don't think about what does that mean for us. And so saying, you know what, every program, I had an amazing experience at Bowling Green. I've met people that they do not share that sentiment. The same thing is at all of our institutions. You'll have people that had an amazing experience, and you'll have some that prefer not to talk about the challenges of that time. And so that doesn't mean that the place is a bad place or it's a good place. And so I think that folks need to really think about, just because someone else had that experience doesn't mean that you will. And so make sure you're asking questions, you're engaging with the program, and you're asking questions like, what is the best thing about this program? But what are some of the areas that students face challenges? The same thing about the field in general. I think that if people do a little bit more time focusing on how do they fit with the field in terms of the values, the benefits of being in student affairs, but also what are some of the drawbacks and what are the reasons why people may leave the field. I think that will help people to really be able to think about and conceptualize their search and to establish fit in a much different way. My final kind of thought is around authenticity. I heard Dr. Mamta Akapati did a keynote the other day that I went to, and she shared the quote by Rumi's, like, let the beauty of what you love be what you do. And it really resonated with me, because I think that's what our field is about, is finding what you love and why you want to serve, and then finding those reasons why. But that needs to come from an authentic place. And if you can think about who you are, what you need, and sometimes that may be irrational to other people, what you need, these will be the same skills that you'll eventually go to do when you're searching for a job. For me, at this stage of my career, I need to be in a city that has a major airport. That's just really important to me. I need to see people who look like me in my institutional environment, as well as in the greater community in which I live. And so Houston offers that for me. But I'm okay with saying I won't go to middle of nowhere right now, because that's who I am and that's authentic for me. And so my fit and my expectations are aligned there. And so I think authenticity is key for anyone navigating this type of search process.
Oh, that was a brilliant ending. Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. And I think probably all of us are engaged in conversations. If there are folks who are watching today who work as student affairs folks on campuses and are mentoring students into the field, hopefully this episode also provided some things to help those folks consider different types of programs. So shout out to Zach Grover at Michigan State University, who I have had multiple conversations with, and to all of the other folks, because I think this field is built upon those relationships as well. So thank you to the four of you. It was a fabulous episode, and I'm really grateful for your time and for your wisdom. Thanks also to our program sponsors, ACPA and M. Stoner. Coming up next on Student Affairs Live, Tony is working on a number of different topics, which are to be announced, to be released soon. And I need to announce that I'm going to be taking a short-term break from Student Affairs Live as I work on my dissertation proposal. And I have exciting news to share. My good friend and fellow CSU Sahi class of 2000 classmate, Dr. Keith Edwards, is going to be returning to Student Affairs Live for a short-term stint as guest host. So I will be back, but his and Tony's episodes are forthcoming. And so please follow along the Higher Ed Live hashtag, and our newsletter is another great way to get information every Monday about what episodes we have coming up. And you can always browse our archives as well. Again, I'm Heather Shea. Thanks again to the fabulous panelists and to everyone who is watching today or on the recordings. Make it a great week, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.